Reserve had postponed their interest rate cuts, which was not a surprise to anybody. Everybody thought for sure that the Federal Reserve was going to be standing still, and they did. Of course, they did promise two interest rates into the future, which will be subject to interpretation as we move forward in seeing what's actually going to take place within the economy. And, the credible threats of tariffs, which are very credible and most likely going to see some substantial tariffs inflicted upon the economy in the next couple of weeks here. But ultimately, what has taken place is the rising inflation expectation. And now I think this is the key to what's going on right now within the economy, because if you have been following the Uneducated Economist and the credible threat theory, then you would know that the Federal Reserve was looking to have the Fed funds rate, which is their short-term interest rate, the Fed funds rate. They wanted that to be neutral, meaning that it was neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. They want it neutral. Now, if the Fed funds rate is above that neutral rate, it's restricting the economy. So if they're trying to slow inflation down, then they want the elevated Fed funds rate to be well above that neutral rate. And by being above that neutral rate, it will slow the economy down by people making less purchases, less investments, stuff like that happening. Now, we look at what the Federal Reserve is now dealing with, considering the tariff and what that does to the future inflation expectation is it elevates it. This is one of the reasons why they're backing off on the whole interest rate cutting idea, is to wait and see what ends up taking place going into the future. Now, of course, Donald Trump is out there screaming his head off, talking about how the Federal Reserve needs to be lowering interest rates to offset that what it is that the tariffs are going to do to the economy, which essentially, I think, in that idea is that the tariffs are going to slow the economy down, and by lowering interest rates, you can spark that business investment, which would then create the economic activity to offset what the tariffs are doing. I think that's kind of like the idea behind it all. Now, again, we're going to have to see what it is that actually comes from the tariffs, since we don't know exactly what countries are going to get what sort of level of tariffs on it. The promise of 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Again, I have to wait and see what it is that actually takes place to see how much and to what extent throughout all these nations. It's very hard to interpret what it is that's actually going to take place. But the idea behind it, right, pushes up the inflation expectation, but it also raises the neutral interest rate. So now this is something interesting to think about, because this is what we have talked about here on this channel for quite some time, is that neutral interest rate is not steady. Like, it's not set by any particular entity out there or a U.S. Treasury 10-year or something like that. Like, the neutral interest rate is this rate that is constantly in adjustment based on what it is that the people are believing and feeling and behaving like. The neutral interest rate can rise and fall depending, regardless of what the Federal Reserve is doing out there. Now, if the Federal Reserve wanted to be at neutral, right, and they wanted to stand still at where they're at, the only way to get neutral to move to them is to elevate the inflation expectation. That's what Trump is doing right now. So now I push that back again and to say, okay, well, that could be a possibility, right? And I'll set that off to the side for just a minute and then go back to the original idea. Why is Trump doing this, right? Because now a lot of people have told me that we're trying to bring wealth back to the United States. Okay, so I can take that into consideration. It was just like trying to bring some of this money that has been moved overseas. They're trying to bring that back. That's what the tariffs are doing. Okay, so let's take that into consideration for just a minute, because if you're trying to bring dollars back to the United States and we're suffering with an inflation expectation that's already elevated, do you think bringing more dollars back to the United States is going to diminish the inflation expectation? I mean, like, if it's more dollars in circulation that's creating the inflation that everybody is now worried about, bringing more dollars back is going to create less inflation expectation? I mean, I'm just kind of curious about that. I mean, I'm just trying to think of the logic behind it. If people believe that money printer causes inflation, then wouldn't just bringing money back from another nation to into our domestic economy, wouldn't that be something similar to that, creating the inflationary scenario? See, this is what I find funny out there is that people say we need to combat the inflation and then do something that actually creates more currency here and there in our domestic economy. I mean, I'm just, is that really what the plan is? Yeah. And so I think about it on another sense too. It's just like, well, if you start bringing dollars in from outside of the nation, you start bringing that wealth back to the United States, what you're going to do is you're going to diminish the amount of dollars that are outside of the United States. Now, that's, cool for some people out there, but really what you're going to end up finding is that the dollar is going to strengthen in that sense. And if it strengthens, what's going to happen is that your domestic exports, right, the ones that you export out of the United States, become very expensive. And actually, the imports get cheaper in that way. So again, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, so what is the actual end game here that's going to be played when you have a situation in which that dollars are coming back to the United States, which causes them to be stronger, right? On the outside of the United States, the demand for dollars will increase if there's a lesser supply of them, which would then make our domestic economy suffer with the fact that our exports would get more expensive for the foreigners to purchase. Like, does that sound like a good idea? I understand that all the people here are like, no, man, what we're going to do is manufacture for ourselves. And I'm like, okay, well, you can't manufacture anything cheaper than some dude out there sleeping on the ground's going to manufacture it for, right? So it's almost like guaranteeing that you're going to have higher inflation if you plan on making it for yourself. So all that stuff, I look at it and I'm like, man, none of that stuff really makes sense to me. Like how it is that they plan on fixing it or dealing with it or all that. And like none of that really, like all that tariff and going to make America great again by doing this, I don't see it. Right? But what I do see is what's happening for the Federal Reserve and the fact that they are trying to have a monetary policy that is sitting at neutral. And the only way to really have a monetary policy that is sitting at neutral without actually doing anything is to get the people to have an elevated inflation expectation. And I see that taking place right now. Like, that's easy. I don't have to do anything. Just turn on the news and look at all the elevated inflation expectation that is being spread out there all over the place. Right? And that works. That is working for the Federal Reserve. And that is actually working for Donald Trump too, because as his mind says, the Federal Reserve needs to have an easier monetary policy, like an easing monetary policy. By spitting out the credible threats of tariffs, he raises the neutral interest rate by the elevated inflation expectation. That neutral interest rate being elevated makes the economy less restricted. He still gets what he wants, even if the Fed doesn't do anything. Right? See, that to me makes sense. All that does. Like, all the rest of the stuff doesn't make sense. It's just like, people are like, oh no, you just wait and see. He's playing this, crazy game of chess, 3D chess or something like that. And I'm like, even still, it doesn't make sense. Right? But it does make sense when you look at it from the monetary policy from the Federal Reserve and what it is that they need, right? And then once you see what it is that they are looking for and what it is that they are hoping for their monetary policy, it looks to me like Donald Trump is totally accommodating the situation. Yeah, it was like, oh, the Federal Reserve, you guys want elevated inflation expectation? You want it moderately above 2%, and the inflation expectation was falling. Hold on one second. I got you, boys. Here, hold my beer. Give me that mic. Boom. Tariff, tariff, tariff. All right? And then all of a sudden you boys got the elevated inflation expectation. Inflation expectations rising. Okay, cool. We're on board, right? We're good. Sailing along, right? Exactly the way that it is that the Federal Reserve had described many years ago. Right? I mean, just look at their recent statement to Congress, right? It was in there saying that they are shooting for moderately above 2%. The consensus statement even going into review right now, Jerome Powell at his last press conference said the portion of inflation that they have in their consensus statement will not be coming up for review. So when that new consensus statement comes out, we will be looking for the words that are written down inside of it that are stating that the Federal Reserve has a monetary policy that is seeking to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. Right? If those words are written down in the consensus statement, we are going to know that right now what we are experiencing within the economic environment with the elevated inflation expectations due to the credible threat of tariffs in order to raise the neutral interest rate so that the Federal Reserve can then have a position in which that stimulating the economy would be an effective tool by the dropping of interest rates, by the dropping of the Fed funds rate. If we see that statement in there, I'm going to know that all this is accurate, like what I'm talking about. I know it is, right? Because everybody else is telling me to wait and see, and I'm like, what? Wait and see for what? I can tell you this is what they are looking for and what they have asked for and what they are achieving. And every time I hear another statement come out that says, hey, man, we got elevated inflation expectation, I'm thinking, man, that is yet another win for the Federal Reserve, who is looking for that exact thing to be taking place. All right, moving on here. You can only cry wolf so many times. But David, you can. You can. You can continue to cry because here's the thing. Nobody knows the credible threat theory. Literally only the people here on the Uneducated Economist understand it. We're it. Even the people who know the term forward guidance still don't understand the credible threat theory. They are not seeing it. They look at a Federal Reserve going for a 2% target. They do not know about flexible average inflation targeting. We're the only ones. I mean, literally, we're it. We're the only ones. And so they can cry wolf as much as they want because nobody knows that that's what they're doing. People playing team politics so they can get away with it. Both sides are... Oh, somebody's trying to call me. All right. Both sides are pissed at the word transitory. Yeah, no kidding. Why are they rehashing it again? The exact same word about inflation that was used during COVID is being used again for tariffs, right? It's because they needed the same scenario to be taking place. They need an elevated inflation expectation to raise the neutral interest rate so that the Fed funds rate is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy and well above the lower bound of zero so that when they go to stimulate the economy during the next recession, they will actually have the room to do that from the dropping of interest rates. Like I say it over and over and over again. It's the same story. I haven't changed this for years. Literally, I mean, you can go back and watch videos that I did talking about this. This is like I'm saying the same thing that I was saying over a year and a half ago about what it is that the Federal Reserve is seeking with their monetary policy. There is nobody else out there who has been as accurate as I have when it comes to this description. Now, I understand everybody else can give it different meaning on what that is, and like, you know, I even hear other people saying, oh man, you should listen to this dude, and then I go and like listen, and then he says something about like a 2% target achievement, and I'm like, dang, he doesn't get it either, right? Flexible average inflation targeting, how many people have ever explained that? How many financial advisors know about flexible average inflation targeting? None. Zero. All right? Because I can't find anybody out there talking about it, right? Other than the Fed. All right. Stable coins. Tether was the 7th large buyer of the U.S. Treasuries in 2024 compared to countries. Yeah, it's because stable coins are going to become the new cryptocurrency in place of the dollar. Right, the idea of a central bank digital currency. I mean, I think that's, I think that's an idea, but I think stable coins is the actual thing that's going to be taking place because the Federal Reserve doesn't have to change. Like the stable coin can just do its thing. They are their own essentially private company, right, so to speak. They can get regulated. The Federal Reserve doesn't have to change anything about the way they are doing because anything that's being backed by the dollar, essentially has monetary policy transferred right into it. So they don't have to develop anything. The development of the stable coin in itself and then being backed by the dollar then gives the Federal Reserve all the power that they need in order to conduct monetary policy and then leave the regulation of the stable coin itself up to government. It's like the perfect plan, you know. Smoke that thumbs up like Cheech and Chong. Thank you so much, All Nighter. It's great to see you up in here, brother. All right. So the Fed is playing 3D chess. No, David, they're not. Like, I don't know what 3D chess is. Like, I don't know when people say they're playing 3D chess, what does that mean? What is, I don't understand. That seems like some kind of like, you know, I'll state that when I don't understand what the whole concept is, and so they're playing 3D chess. I don't get that. Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. The Federal Reserve has been and will be going into the future with one idea, right? Fed funds rate at neutral, well above the lower bound of zero, right? However they achieve that. Now, if you can kind of grasp that idea that they are wanting the Fed funds rate to be neutral, but then to be well above the lower bound of zero. The point of that being is that when they drop the Fed funds rate, they generally want to drop it around 5%. If they are going to drop at 5% and hit the lower bound of zero, then they have to be far enough below neutral to create some stimulating effect. If the neutral interest rate is very close to zero, then it won't have the stimulating effect on the economy like most people think it does. Quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for, and they had spent a decade at the lower bound of zero interest rate policy for a very long time. It failed them. It doesn't work. That doesn't work. It doesn't create the inflationary scenario that the Federal Reserve is looking for. Think about it. 10 years at zero interest rates, or close to 10 years at zero interest rates with quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, taking the Fed's balance sheet from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, and it failed to produce an inflationary scenario. Like, it didn't work. Like, the whole thing didn't work. Right? Now, in the minds of the people, it did work, because they ended up with an elevated inflation expectation. Believe me, I was one of them. I was screaming hyperinflation, thinking that silver was going to go to $500 an ounce. Right? Because of all the money printing and everything that was going on. By 2018, there had barely been any inflation. Ran consistently under the 2% target that the Federal Reserve had established. Right? They couldn't do it. Like, people say, oh, the Federal Reserve's going for a 2% target. And I was just like, can you ever show me any time in history in which that they have ever achieved a 2% target? Like, ever? No, because they've never done it, ever. Not once. Not once in the history of time have they ever consistently been at a 2% target. Right? So the idea that that's what they're going for is just completely like lunacy. It's just like, you know, okay, if you could actually show me a time in history when they were able to do it, then I would believe that's what they're actually attempting to achieve. But they're not, so that's not what they're doing. So seeing it, understanding it, and knowing that their Fed funds rate being at the lower bound of zero with the neutral interest rate close to zero was essentially destroying their ability to stimulate the economy, they knew that they would have to change the way that they conduct themselves. And this is where their jawboning, forward guidance, credible threat started to step in. By giving the expectation that endless money printing was going to take place out there, that we are going to keep interest rates at a consistently low zero interest rate policy for a significant amount of time, this created the inflation expectation that they were hoping for, but it wasn't enough. Right? So this time around, they were like, okay, we got to really nail it. We got to really nail it if we are going to create an inflation expectation that is going to be well elevated. Severing the supply chain and stimulating the economy with a bunch of checks, and then screaming at the top of their lungs at every direction they possibly can from every different media outlet, including things that normally would not have any kind of communication about economy, things like The View, right? All these information of inflation and an elevated inflation expectation was bombarded across the entire media spectrum. Okay? That was part of the plan. It was part of the plan inside of the communication styles coming from the Federal Reserve, that they knew that they would have to be able to deploy the information in many different directions, because if they went through their normal channels, only a select group of people would actually listen, because nobody pays attention to the Federal Reserve, right? Nobody cares about the Fed. You could ask 100 people out there, name everything you know about the Federal Reserve, they would think it's a government entity. That would be it, right? And they would be wrong. So it's like, the idea of the Federal Reserve and the people understanding who the Fed is and what it is that they do, they are completely clueless. But then if some smart dude comes up on TV and says, hey, let me tell you about the Federal Reserve, and then they spit out this inflation expectation that is well elevated to them, they have no other choice but to believe it. Because that's how propaganda works. And it worked well. It worked really well. Everybody with their elevated inflation expectation totally saved the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. Inflation ran up to its all-time high of that anybody had experienced in our lifetime, right? And the Federal Reserve combated that with the elevated Fed funds rate, which is exactly what they were hoping to do. They were like, man, we need elevated Fed funds rate in order to have some sort of ammunition to deal with the next downturn. If we're down here at 2% or even less, that's 0%, there's nothing that we can do to stimulate the economy with the adjustment of interest rates. It's a broken tool. How do we get that back? Inflation expectation. It's the only way to get it back. And without an elevated inflation expectation, it was going to screw them up. John Williams talks about this extensively in a speech called Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World, given November 18th of 2018. I think it was November 18th. Might have been November 20th. I can't remember. It was towards the end of November 2018. Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World. He talked extensively about this whole problem that they were facing. So now it's getting closer to the point that the Federal Reserve is going to be neutral. And it's totally like, to them, they're like, man, we didn't really have to do much. You notice that? Like, we ran interest rates up to, the 5%, and then sat there for a while and didn't do anything. And then we dropped interest rates a little bit, and then we didn't do anything for a while. And then we did a little bit of adjustment of balance sheet, and now we're not going to do anything for a while. You notice they're not doing anything. They're barely doing anything at all. They don't need to do anything. They can just sit there, stand still, don't do anything, and then have the neutral interest rate achieve them. I did a video about this, talking that exact thing over a year and a half ago, and somebody took that video that I had done and edited it so that there was there was graphs and features. I'll go get the link to it. I'll leave it down in the description of this video after it's uploaded. It was really cool. It was really cool. And to think that I had put that video out so long ago, and here it is playing out exactly the way that I had described it. It's just amazing. It's just like, dang, man, I got this, right? And, so many people are like, man, no, this is all brand new, changing issues that are happening within, changing by the minute, and I'm like, nah, not even close. I wouldn't have been able to describe this a year and a half ago the way I did if it wasn't for the fact that the Fed and the government are working together in order to achieve this elevated inflation expectation to save the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve. That's it. To think that they're fighting each other is absolutely incorrect. It is absolutely incorrect. They could not be more in cahoots right now than ever. Man, how much time do I have left here? Oh, yeah, I got a few more minutes. All right. Why is finding Jesus so important? People are stressed and worried about the Fed making the decision that all the reality means nothing. It's a constant rat race. Seek the Lord and find peace. Well, Psalms 91, I mean, you're here listening and you're taking the information in, and you say that they shouldn't take it in, but yet you're taking it in. You don't think that your subconscious mind is going to be picking up this information, the words that I am using, so that therefore you can be making appropriate decisions for yourself? I mean, you're here, you're listening. And I'm not trying to deny what it is that you feel that people should be listening to or whatever in order to find peace and happiness in their life. I mean, hey, man, you might have the appropriate path for it, but all I'm getting at is that you're thinking that people shouldn't be taking this information in. They should be taking something else, but you're here listening. Right? All right. Keep buying Doge. We'll all be, what is it? Martian importers? All right. David, if they are working together, is 3D chest. I don't see that, man. I don't get it. Like, to me, I don't think it like that. I don't know. Maybe it's so complicated that it needs to be described inside of a 3D chess kind of thing. But to me, that it doesn't need to be done like that. Like, it could literally be decided in this fashion: communication through TV, through media outlets, is the propagandized information that is conducting monetary policy. All right. Then you look at the communication to each other to understand what it is that they are actually trying to do with monetary policy. Because monetary policy, in the sense that we are looking at it, is propagandized information to deal with the future inflation expectation and dealing with market conditions and stuff like that. Like, that's what they're trying to deal with. Like, you know that it's all about the communication style when they can deliver the interest rate cut, give it two different meanings, and have two different results. All right. So either they give it a meaning that says, hey, we're doing this for a weakening economy, we have recessionary pressures, all this other stuff. That will deliver with an interest rate cut, will create a situation in which that you would expect interest rates to rise, even though the Fed cut. Because of the weakening economy, people will then say, hey, if I'm going to deploy my money, then I want a higher return. Right? The capital investment starts requiring a higher return because people are feeling the weakening economy. If the Fed delivers the interest rate cut and saying this is a supportive action and not one due to a recession or weakening economy, then what you would end up seeing is interest rates coming down. They can do the same thing, deliver it with a new meaning, with a different meaning, and end up with a different result. Right? Like, to me, like, that might be very confusing and like just like blows people's minds out and say, nah, that can't possibly be, you're wrong on it. This is their own words. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up saying, hey, I'm assuming this. This is their own statements, like from Fed documents. I don't make shit up, right? Like, I leave links down in the description to everything that I've ever done and said. So, I mean, I can prove what it is that I'm saying. Like, I'm just the uneducated economist. If somebody comes to me and says, dude, you're super uneducated, you have no idea what you're talking about, you're like, hold on one second, click, click, click. There you go. There's where I said it. Right? Because I need to back up everything that I say because I'm the uneducated economist. Everything I say, I can back up. Give me power over a nation's money economy, and I care not who makes the laws. Trump's come and go, the Fed is static. All right. Okay, so somehow the Elon Fox interview 319 was counterproductive. I don't know. I don't listen to Elon Musk. I don't think that guy's important. I mean, I hardly think the things that Trump says is important, right? I mean, I think what he says has an impact on the markets and the people's behaviors, and so I look at what the people are feeling from his words, but I just don't think these people are that important. I really don't. I mean, they're going to be long gone from history. Nobody will have any idea about their leadership or anything else, and we're going to still be alive trying to deal with our lives. Right? Give it 10 years, these people are not going to be anywhere. Right? You're not going to hear one thing about any of these elected officials or anybody else. Right? Think about all the leaders during 9/11. Right, during the terrorist attacks in 9/11, is there any of them still trying to be the leader of this nation? Is there a single one of them? All those decisions that they make, are they here to now defend the decisions that they make? Are we here to blame those people for the decisions that they make? They're gone. They're all gone, right? And we're here trying to deal with the decisions that they have made. I don't find them to be making decisions that are going to be appropriate for me. I just don't see it, right? And so therefore, I take their importance and I put it down very low. And I say, what I understand about the situation is more important than their decision making, right? I can't make a decision. I can't make them make the right decision for me. I can only make the right decision based on what it is that's going on out there. And since I figure that is more important than anything else, what I am doing, what I think, what I feel, what it is that I am seeing out there is far more important than anything else out there. Right? So people are like, no, you got to give importance to these statements. You got to give importance to Elon Musk. You got to give importance to Russia. You got to give importance to all this. And I'm like, I don't. Right? Those things, I mean, they're critical, right? They're critical situations that are happening out there. But my importance is more on the information that I am receiving so that I can make decisions based on what it is that I can do today. Right? That's important to me. How do you think the separation from the rich and the poor work effect? The society will still have a family-centered society. M. Ryder, it's going to be very difficult. Now, I mean, as far as, if you notice, like, the population is declining, especially those in, like, you know, the Western nations, the industrialized nations, like, you know, the population diminishes because nations of wealth actually have a smaller population, have lesser population growth. Poverty-stricken nations, they have bigger population growth, right? They have more kids. They have, you know, it's just like, it's hard to wrap your head around why, because everybody wants to come up with, like, well, it's the environment, it's like, you know, advance and, like, birth controls, it's education, it's all this other stuff. Like, they come up with all these things, and every one of those is accurate in the sense that they are occurring and they are symptoms of the problem. But it's not a problem. They are symptoms of the situation. But the situation is that once you have increased increased your standard of living, you do not want to do things that diminish your standard of living. Having kids is expensive and it lowers your standard of living. So generally, most people don't want to do things in their life that lowers their standard of living or makes it more difficult for them to have that elevated standard or that elevated lifestyle. If you are poor and you have nothing, and really the only thing lesser than what you have is death because you are poverty stricken, you can have as many kids as you want. It doesn't diminish your life any, right? In fact, it only has the chance of enhancing your life. So poverty-stricken nations have a lot of kids because it doesn't diminish their life. You know, not like having an elevated lifestyle in which that having kids makes it difficult for you to maintain that. What time is it? All right, guys, I got like another 5 minutes. Elon saved the astronauts. Okay. I pay $850 a month for one child for a private school. See how expensive that is? It cost in Western countries, you care about that. In a poor country, it doesn't matter. Kids are God's gift to man. Some people are so poor, all they have is money. Poor people are happier. In a deindustrialized nation, a big problem for the U.S. is inevitable. Right? Is deindustrialized nation a big problem for the U.S. or is it inevitable? Are you talking like the manufacturing base leaving? Because, like, so long as the world is accepting U.S. dollars and using U.S. treasuries as the safe and liquid asset, I think the United States is going to be ruling for quite some time. And since there's really nobody out there who can do what the United States is doing, which basically is it being able to issue out all those safe and liquid assets like U.S. treasuries, there's no other nation out there that's willing to go into debt as deep as the United States has done. And really, nobody really wants to trust the United States. They certainly don't want to trust anybody else out there, like especially like China or Russia or India or something like that. to provide a safe and liquid asset like U.S. Treasuries. I mean, if you hold a U.S. Treasury, you have something that is guaranteed to pay, zero chance of default. Now, I know a lot of people out there feel very differently and have a much different opinion about it, but the fact is that there's literally nothing else out there in the world that compares to what the U.S. dollar is doing and what the U.S. Treasuries are. So, to me, like, as long as that's happening, the United States is always going to remain on top. The manufacturing base, that's impossible. You're never going to bring that back. Right? I mean, you can try. You can try and bring it back, but it's going to take ever-increasing amounts of subsidies and tariffs and government intervention. And the moment that they don't do it, the moment that they back away from that effort, you lose your job. Right? All of a sudden, boom, your job is overseas. It's gone. So to me, no, there is no way of doing it. The only way that you can really successfully create an economy that is going to be strong is to be production and savings. We're not that. We're debtors. We're spenders. We're debtors and consumers. So production and savings is done when you have a strong middle class who is manufacturing stuff and sending it out there to the world. We're not going to go back to that. When we have a standard of living that is higher than just about anybody else in the world, and certainly higher than those of the manufacturing nations out there, you're not going to be able to compete. Ever increasing amounts of tariffs and subsidies will give you the illusion that you can create inside of that economy what it is that you feel is going to be appropriate and strong and, money flowing and all that other stuff. The moment that the government is not involved in it, you lose your job. So basically, you're going to become a government employee if the tariffs and subsidies is what's required in order to keep the manufacturing base here, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. You end up becoming a government employee, even if you're working for a private industry. So, there's nothing you can do, right? The only thing you can do is understand that that's the situation and to be able to prepare yourself for it by, understanding that you need to be a property ownership, right? You need to be in the capitalistic mindset where you're investing your capital into something that's going to have a return, whether it's like stocks and bonds or businesses or even yourself with education. Whatever it is that you are deploying that money towards, you're going to expect a return from it. So capitalistic mindsets and property ownership, that's it. That's the only thing that you can really do, because everything else is going to have some sort of elevated expectation that the government is going to do the right thing, and they're not. Like, they're not going to do the right thing because the right thing would be too painful for everybody to actually vote for an elected leader to do that. It's just like, I want to vote for the guy who's going to tell me who's going to tell me that I can't borrow money, who's going to tell me that I have to work twice as hard as what I'm doing, who's telling me that I'm going to have to save as much as I can, and telling me that I'm going to be forcing my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren into that experience so that we can save the economy. Yay. Right? Like, who's going to vote for somebody like that? Nobody. So it's not going to happen. It's just better to understand that it's a cyclical thing. It's like, you grow, you get big, you turn into this beautiful flower, and then it dies, right? And that's like, it's a cyclical thing. It's just the way it works. Understanding Cantillon effect is like, it actually alleviates a lot of the stress in which that people end up taking on trying to think of a way to fix it. Once you accept the fact that it's not a fixable thing, but that it's a cyclical thing, and that you have to position yourself inside of the cycle in order to find the best outcome for yourself. Once you see it in this fashion, you kind of like let go of the idea that they're going to do the right thing, and instead, right, you look at it in a different fashion. How do I become a capitalist? How do I become the property owner? And that's it. Like, you just take on that mindset, and then you change from they're going to do the right thing, right? Because they're not going to do the right thing. All right, man. Oh, a couple more comments and I got to go. All right. The first chance the computers can wipe out all humans, they will. Ron Paul always said that it would not be easy. I voted for and loved him. Yeah, me too. I stuff envelopes for a living. Yeah. All right. What do you think the normal 8 to 5 job is going to look like in the future? What do you mean? Like, what kind of job will it be, or what is it going to provide for people? Because it already, even a good job sucks. So, like, a regular 8 to 5, 8 to 5 job, whatever, a regular hourly job isn't going to do it. Like, actually, I shouldn't say that. With your regular hourly job, you could probably make ends meet. That's it, right? You're not going to have anything else. So if you want anything good in your life, you're going to have to put out a hell of a lot more effort. That's all there is to it, right? And so as people are like, man, I shouldn't have to work more than 40 hours a week. Well, okay, that's great. That's your opinion. You probably shouldn't have to work for more than 40 hours a week. I do. Right? I mean, I work my full-time job, then I do YouTube, then I have a side hustle. I have to do that if I'm going to live in this town. So when people tell me, man, I shouldn't have to work 40 hours a week, and I'm like, okay, well, then don't. I'm going to go be a property owner capitalist. You bitch and complain about the government. I mean, I don't know. Like, you take your path, I'll take mine. We'll figure out who's going to be successful at the end of the day. Right? Because I know that there is no changing government to make them do the right thing. It ain't going to happen. I look at Facebook and all these people pouring off all this bitching and complaining about what the government's doing, from Biden to Trump to Obama and Bush and all these people. They have all this bitching and complaining to do, but very few people are saying to themselves, man, how do I take this information and run with it so that I can actually excel in life? People are like, Biden made it worse for everybody. And I'm like, well, it made it worse for you guys. I did quite well. Right? And it wasn't Biden who did it. It was because I was making appropriate decisions for myself based on the information I was getting. I did great during Trump's administration. I did great during Biden's administration. I'm going to do great as I go into the future because I don't have expectations of being a failure. And I don't think that anything that's going on out there is going to create a situation in which that I'm going to be a failure. I can only see successful opportunities for myself. That's it. Sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're more frequent than others, but nothing but success for the future. That's it. Right? Failure's not an option. Alrighty, guys, this was fun. I gotta go though. God loves work. All right. The thing is, if you don't have an 8 to 5 job, your grist gets failing spectacular. I guess it's all in the risk. Everybody's got to do their thing. With tar and feathers, what are you guys talking about? You better know the enemy, period. Just remember, we the people at the time, we can make the change. That's right. That's right. Like, we can make the change anytime you want within your own thoughts, within the meaning that you give everything that is happening out there. I couldn't, I said this the other day, like, I'm listening to a lady, like, she is crying her eyes out because of what's happening right now. And I'm like, why in the world are you watching this? Like, turn the damn TV off and go to the beach. Hang out there, enjoy your day, because whatever it is that you are spending your time focusing in on is deteriorating your health, is deteriorating your mental health. Right? And so it's just like, to me, I take the information in, not one so that I can be angry about it, right? I used to do that with like the New World Order kind of stuff. I take the information in and I'm like, okay, how do I use this to better myself? That's it. That's the only thing I use it for. There is no bad information. There's no good information. It's just information in the meaning that you have given it. That's it. Period. End of story. Nothing else to it. There is no other information there is no other meaning than the meaning that you are giving it. That's it. Everything's a neutral, essentially. Everything is. Like, the only difference is like how you feel about it and what you think is the importance of it. Alrighty, guys, this was fun. I gotta go. Thank you, Brody. He says hit like on the stream, please, everybody, because that will make the YouTube share it more widely so we get more interesting questions up in here. Thank you, Brody. Thank you, All Nighter, for being here. You guys are awesome. Silver Bar, silver bar for you. What is that? I appreciate it, man. He says, thanks, Simon. You guys are awesome. Thank you all for being here. 248 people watching with 78 likes. Be sure and hit that like button before you click out of the live stream. And thank you for being here. Share the video around, subscribe, do all those wonderful things, and become a member of the channel for $1 a month. You'll get some of the best information that you could possibly get on monetary policy broken down by the uneducated economist in a way that the average everyday working class individual can then have a discussion about. And these are breaking down the speeches by the Federal Reserve in a way that nobody else is doing. So become a member of the channel. $1 a month. You get to support the uneducated economist and get some of the best information that you could possibly get on monetary policy, and have a conversation with other like-minded individuals who are also trying to use this information to better themselves. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.